Overseeing and supervising ASI's finances, money, and assets is a part of the VP of Finance role. How can you ensure and/or increase the access to and transparency of the use of student fees within Associated Student Inc.?
So I understand that many students don't really know how ASI fees work and how they're spent. So I want to advocate for better transparency within the ASI budget allocations. And I want to push for a clear breakdown of the ASI budget and hopefully be able to post this on the ASI website, updated weekly or even monthly if weekly is not possible, so that students can see exactly where their student fees every year is going. Because this year there was a $284 increase in their student fees every semester, and I do want to just take the time to acknowledge that and understand their frustrations. But I want to also ensure that I'm going to advocate that these fees are being allocated properly.
Student government's primary responsibility is to serve the student body. However, our students have at times requested that the student government take stands on social justice issues that extend beyond our campus. Is it a fact that many social justice movements throughout our history have advanced because of student activism? Do you believe that our student government should take positions on social justice issues? And if so, how?
Personally, I do believe that if students should have the right to be able to advocate their rights on campus, and I believe it should be an open, free space. I do also, after speaking with officials in ASI, I don't also want to just present legislation because sometimes that doesn't equal or translate to action on campus. Sometimes, in the past, there actually have been altercations with organizations advocating on campus, and I have been informed that legislation is actually very hard to implicate in those matters, and it is actually more based on a collective dealership with CSUs as a whole. So I think it's very important that we work together as a community in trying to see what is more possible and trying to project students' visions and opinions.
I think, for example, my entire past term has been dedicated to working with a lot of student organizers on our campus and making sure that their voices are heard in the legislation that we create. Let me just list you the first one. There was a resolution that we created to oppose oppressive policies that use our taxpayer money to support the military-industrial complex abroad from Palestine to the Philippines. Those are just inappropriate humanitarian crises and genocides ongoing across seas, and our students are speaking up about it. But unfortunately, we have a CSU system that has placed a time, place, manner policy that has created improper outreach and blatant silencing of our student voices. Quote unquote, the CSU Chancellor's Office said students do not have the absolute freedom of speech. And we can all agree that this needs to end now. We, the students, need to fight back and defend our rights and our resources, especially from this federal administration that continues to attack the very resources that we use. So I always like to say this: grab your brooms, let's take this fight to the Chancellor's Office, Sacramento, and Washington, D.C., because they're all a mess.
This is a fairly interesting question. Historically, student advocacy for certain social justice topics have been a very good way of getting the issue spread around, a very good way of getting the issue out there. And I tend to agree more with my opponent here in that legislation can not always lead to action. It can also not always lead to a good thing. It'd be a good thing. Typically, all opinions should be heard. But as we have seen recently on our campus with the rising of certain ideals, whether it be you are pro or against abortion, whether you are against mass deportation or for mass deportation, as we've seen recently with people coming to our campus speaking out. And when you allow things like this, you have to accept all of it. All views have to be heard.
Students on campus, first years more so than not, lack a feeling of unity and campus connection. ASI's role is to enhance the lives of students on campus. How do you plan to engage students more actively while in the role of president?
So honestly, this has been one of my biggest points, and especially with the USU closing down, which is a hub for community students, it is going to be devastating. Speaking from a former community student myself, I believe the way that we're going to have to address this issue is by investing more resources into the clubs and student organizations on campus, whether this be FSL, so fraternities and sororities, or just regular clubs. These students are going to find a community somewhere on campus, and we need to invest in those clubs, make sure that they can accommodate for that increase of students. Because those students who relied on the USU are going to be moving to clubs, and we need to make sure that they are ready and can accommodate for that influx.
Yeah, I think it's about building community. I think it's about reaching out to people. There's this thing going on in ASI and student organizations. We are kind of separated as ASI. We kind of do our own thing as ASI. And so if I'm elected president, one of the things that I do is I start outreaching to these student organizations, because right now, ASI is like, kind of like I was saying, they're kind of on their own. They're not really doing anything. And how are we going to, just like Nicholas was saying, with our student union closing, how are we going to be able to actually build a community with that closing? That is our identity as a campus, and now that is being taken away. And so it starts with ASI and giving student organizations direct communication, because they're the ones that are actually engaging our campus in the first place.